Did you bring up the dog?
Yes, enough, Stuart.
With Trump. Did you
this
bring
interview
up the dog
is
with Trump?
ridiculous, what you were doing right now.
So
you need to stop. It is.
So if you asked me a month ago, who's at the top of the list to run with Donald Trump, I would have said your name. If you asked me that same question this morning, I don't even think you're on the list. Governor, I'm not asking you about the details of this alleged meeting. I'm asking if the meeting actually happened. I don't think it did. And I think if it did, you'd be able to confirm for me that, yes, it did.
Kristi Noem, the Republican governor of South Dakota and woman who sabotaged her own chance to be Donald Trump's running mate, was humiliated this morning in back-to-back interviews on the Fox Propaganda Network and Newsmax. And in one particularly tense moment, she even lashed out at the Fox host for asking a perfectly reasonable question. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video. Kristi Noem is somebody that we've talked about in previous videos, but not so much recently, even though, quite frankly, there is plenty to talk about. She's a Republican governor of South Dakota, and prior to a couple of weeks ago, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many others, she was the person most likely to be Donald Trump's running mate this year. And if he won the election in that timeline, she would have been the vice president of the United States. Now that is almost certainly not going to happen because she killed her own political career. She recently released a book, and in the book, she includes an anecdote in which she executes her daughter's puppy because she thought the puppy was untrainable. And it turns out that both Democrats and Republicans still are united by their love of dogs. And so she caught unrelenting, but richly deserved pushback and backlash from right-wing media, mainstream media, from Republicans, from Democrats. And so she has been flailing and floundering, going in front of every camera she possibly can to try to salvage her political career. And we've got a couple of clips because these clips from this morning come from back-to-back interviews this morning with right-wing media. So she is playing on friendly turf and she is still struggling. We're going to start with the Fox News host. She's talking to Stuart Varney, who is one of the tamer, conservative news hosts, one of the least feisty, the least combative, one of the friendliest ones there. And she still can't help but screw it up. We're going to play two clips of this and unpack it together.
If you were writing the book today, would you include the dog story?
You know, this is a wonderful book. Did you read the book?
Not yet.
Oh, you should. The first chapter.
But the question stands.
The whole first
chapter. If you were writing it today,
yes, I'm
would
proud
you
of this
include
book.
the dog story?
I'm proud of this book. If you read the first chapter, it's all about when this rioting started. When you turn on the news today and all you see that's happening on these college campuses and what's going on with supporting Hamas and the pro-terrorist organizations, the first chapter in this book covers the riots that happened at the RNC at the White House and how that started with Antifa and the fact that this president that's in the White House, Joe Biden, will not shut this down and that they're chanting hatred towards the Jewish people and exterminating them. That's what people should be talking about, Stuart.
Your political
and so I know that a lot of people are using attacks and trying to take me down because they're scared of me. Listen, I've run 12 campaigns and all I've done is one. I win everything that I do.
Support you on shooting the dog.
I'm honest. Well, I've heard a lot of people. I've heard a lot of people that say, listen, this was 20 years ago. 50 states.
We're consumed with emails.
50 states have a law in the books.
You're going to be on, and we've been consumed with emails saying, I won't vote for this person. I won't vote for Trump if he puts her in the vice presidential spot.
Well, I'll tell you, Stuart, I'm sorry you're not hearing from real Americans that live on farms and ranches. Because if every state has a law in the books that allows for animals that are killing livestock and attacking people to be handled this way.
Okay.
And so I made a decision as a mom, and I'm a grandma, that the safety of my children and the safety of people was what I needed to decide on, basis protecting them from a very dangerous animal.
So again, she didn't handle that particularly well. It's not like she engaged in any sort of histrionics or shouting like some MAGA Republicans do. She was very calm, very poised, but certain things give it away. Like she was constantly interrupting Varney. She was not answering the question. She was trying to deflect. When he would try to ask the question again, she just kept cutting across like she was reading a script from a teleprompter. Okay, that is the clue for somebody like Kristi Noem, a seasoned political operative, that she is extremely uncomfortable. Also note the dig in there. She's getting backlash again from the left and the right, from Democrats and Republicans. She's getting ratioed every time she posts on Twitter. So it's safe to say, as best I can tell, that the majority of Americans who know about her and the situation disagree with her. So she is unpopular at the moment, and her position is unpopular. And how does she respond? Well, real Americans agree with me. That's a quote from her, quote, real Americans, quote. And this is, again, something that Republicans do when they are confronted with the unpopularity of whatever their position is, usually things like healthcare and tax cuts, but in this case, just murdering puppies. She's like, well, those aren't real Americans. My critics aren't real Americans. I'm a real American. People who agree with me, people in my cult, those are real Americans. Super condescending, elitist stuff from the Republican Party, which we never talk about nearly enough. In this clip, this is where she finally loses it a little bit and lashes out at Stuart Varney, who, again, as you can tell from this clip, is a pretty chill guy.
You still think that you are in line to be Trump's vice president?
No, it's up to Donald Trump. He's the only person who will decide this. He's the only person who will decide. And yes, I do speak to him.
May I ask what he said to you about being vice president?
No, I never tell anybody my personal conversations with
Did the dog story
President
come up
Trump.
in a conversation with
Trump? I talk to President Trump all the time.
About the dog?
About a lot of things. And right now, I tell you what, he is being persecuted in a political witch hunt in this court case. So I'm proud of him about how tough he is and how well he is doing.
Did you bring up the dog?
Yes, enough, Stuart.
Did you
this
bring
interview
up the dog
is ridiculous, what you were doing right now.
So
you need to stop. It is.
Okay.
It is.
We'll
Let's talk about some real topics that Americans care about.
I'm afraid we're out of time.
Oh, well, of course we are.
We do thank you for being with us.
Right.
I know I pressed hard, but that's what people are talking about to this day.
Yeah.
Governor Noem, thanks for joining us.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate it.
You bet.
Well, that was awkward. She didn't like that one bit, lashing out and demanding that he stop. That's some snowflake stuff, right? Imagine if a Democrat were to say that to a Fox host or any other host for that matter, how Kristi Noem and others like her would just pick that Democrat apart. But it's actually Kristi Noem who can't handle the heat, even though she inflicted it on herself. She released the book. She wrote the book. She volunteered this information. This is an anecdote from 20 years ago. And as far as I know, there were no other witnesses to the execution of this puppy. She volunteered it. She hoisted herself on her own petard. But there's also another thing, which is that in the book, she says that she went to North Korea, crossed the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, met with Kim Jong-un, the tyrannical leader of North Korea, and stared that, quote, little tyrant in the face. But apparently, according to investigators on both sides of the aisle, there is no record that she ever met with Kim Jong-un. And so apparently, this anecdote is a lie. And she has all but confirmed that it's a lie and said that she would take it out of the book. But it's also important to note, she wrote the book. And even if you say, well, she didn't write the book, she ghost wrote the book, she herself read the audiobook of the book. So we know for a fact, she read that passage and didn't bother to correct it, say, whoa, wait, this is an exaggeration. This isn't true. She was going to leave it in to try to inflate her image as this very hawkish, powerful leader. And it turns out the whole thing is a lie. And it's so bad, again, from the very same book about the dog killing thing, that she gets read the Riot Act by a Newsmax host. So she's not even just getting it from the Fox Propaganda Network. She's getting it from Newsmax, which is even more far right than Fox. She's catching friendly fire here, and it's glorious to behold.
So Governor, if you asked me a month ago, who's at the top of the list to run with Donald Trump, I would have said your name. If you asked me that same question this morning, I don't even think you're on the list.
Really?
So my question
And
for
why
you,
is that?
yes, really, and it's because of things that have come out in this book, like your claims that you met Kim Jong-un, and then over the last week,
I've been to the DMZ. I've been to the area. What I've said
is that... Did you stare down Kim Jong-un?
Let
me, Governor, one second. I will give you an opportunity to respond. I just want to get this out there. So here's the quote from the book. You say that, I remember when I met North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. Governor, that never happened, did it?
What I have said in the book is that when I became aware of the content, that we had it changed. And that's the way that it is. So I should not have put that anecdote in the book. That I'm not going to talk about my meetings.
But an anecdote indicates that it happened, right?
I'm not going to talk about my conversations with world leaders. I've been involved in policy for 30 years. For 30 years, I've been traveling the world, talking to world leaders, and that is a conversation that I'm not going to have in this book. So I've answered that in interviews already. I've been very forthright, and I think that a typical politician wouldn't be that honest. As soon as it became to my attention, I asked for the content to be changed, and it has been.
Governor, I'm not asking you about the details of this alleged meeting. I'm asking if the meeting actually happened. I don't think it did. And I think if it did, you'd be able to confirm for me that, yes, it did. And here's when it happened. It happened, say, at such and such a date or a month, or you don't have to be specific.
I'm not going to talk about my conversations.
You're going to
with world
continue to
leaders.
have to answer this question then.
I don't think so, because the average American citizen is more worried about the border. They're more worried about what we see in a White House and a president that since January has gone out there and misled the American people over 150 times, and nobody pushes him on what he says, that he was imprisoned with Nelson.
So then she flips it and says Joe Biden's lied. Joe Biden's lied or misled the public 150 times. Okay, let's assume that that's true. Well, number one, nice deflection, but I can deflect too. I can point out, and we've brought this up before, the Washington Post fact check, which documented 35,000 documented lies, falsehoods, and misleading statements from Donald Trump during his 4 years in office. So I'll take Joe Biden over Donald Trump, given that just by your standard, Donald Trump is an infinitely more prolific and egregious liar. So you still lose, Kristi Noem. I don't know why you would want to invite other people, a comparison to other people, because MAGA will always lose on the honesty front. But yeah, this is where we are. Kristi Noem was probably going to be Donald Trump's vice presidential running mate. She will almost certainly not be now. Even Donald Trump, as stupid as he can be, will surely understand that she is dead weight. She is deleterious. She is detrimental to his movement. As Stuart Varney, the Fox News host, said in the first clip, he's hearing from people who say, if Trump picks her as VP, I will not vote for Trump. That's how divisive and unlikable Kristi Noem is. And I got to say, one thing that I've really appreciated about the response that she's been getting is the left hasn't let up on this. Liberals and progressives and Democrats, we tend to be super kind and forgiving. We believe in rehabilitative justice, and we tend to maybe complain a couple of days and then we move on. But the pressure on Kristi Noem, calling her out for her lies, her dishonesty, her cruelty, it has been nonstop, and I love it. That's the sort of pressure that Democrats and people aligned with the Democratic bloc need to continue to impose on MAGA Republicans. We need to bully the bullies. It's perfectly fair. She deserves this. She brought this on herself. She was the one who volunteered this cruel anecdote. She was the one who made this egregious lie about foreign policy. There's no telling what other falsehoods are riddled in this book, assuming she wrote it to begin with. But again, she read the audiobook, so she's aware of all of it. And I love the fact that we are seeing her political career implode before her very eyes. I love it. I love the flailing and the floundering and the despair. And I don't think anybody should let up. I don't think so. She would not let up if the shoe was on the other foot. She would show no mercy for the reputation and the political consequences of the particular person. She would be encouraging it on if the shoe were on the other foot. And I'm glad that both in the right and the left, none of them, from Fox News to Newsmax, are letting up on this. And so hopefully Kristi Noem, once she finishes this term as a governor, we'll never hear from her politically again. That's the goal. Let me know what you think in the comments.